It's going to be a little bit different control on the unbaked bead because obviously it's a lot softer and you have more of a tendency to dig down into it. So be very careful when you're just going and trying to just kind of skim the surface. You're probably going to get a thicker line and a more consistently deep and wide line. That's a much different look. So different projects will call for different things, just depends on what you want to do. So I'm just doing the same pattern just to show you the different methods. And some little extra lines here. So that's really, really basic carving. You can, nice thing about raw clay is if you mess up like that, you just press it back into place and start again. There you go. So you get the idea. That's just real basic carving. Then, of course, with this one, you would bake it before you do any of the other steps in this process. This one's ready to go. Okay. So let's do some backfilling now. I happen to love grout, and I like making when I do mosaics in polymer, I like to make my own grout. I don't like to actually use that one for tile. I make it out of polymer clay. So choose the color you want, and a little grout goes a really long way. So I just picked a little bit of a contrasting color there. And you need to make it really, really soft so it will actually press into those lines and stay in there. So I make it soft by adding a little bit of mineral oil. Just basic mineral oil I got at the store in the pharmacy section. And a little bit goes a long way. I would suggest that you pour it into some other container, a cup or something, because it's not a matter of if, but when you tip this over, and it'll be a lot less messy to clean up this little bit than here. Just be real careful with mineral oil because it is kind of goopy. Anyway, so you just take a tiny little fingerful of the mineral oil, and rub it onto the surface of the clay that you want to turn into grout, and just mix thoroughly. And depends on your project, how deep your lines are, how messy you want to get. As to how much oil you want. This is pretty warm clay, and it has a bit of oil in it already, so this is ready to go. It's sticky, but it will fill in those cracks. So, move that aside before I spill it, and you just want to actually put a blob right on top and press right in. I'm both pressing and pulling back. So I'm kind of removing the surface as I fill in the cracks. Now this doesn't have to be a one-step process. If your clay is sticking for some reason, or when you pull, it pulls it right back out of the channel, you can do a partial fill and then go ahead and bake it and then go back in later and fill in more gaps. So I'm just going to get that in there pretty well. I will just do one side for now, but you can do both sides. And just really, really press it. Make sure you don't want any air gaps in there either, because when you clean off the top, it will actually, pull the clay right back out. So you can leave a little bit on the surface. And then notice the messy part, or the messier part. I'm going to take a little paper towel and just rip off a little bit at a time because it gets kind of messy. I'm going to go back and I'm going to take my oil, just dip a little bit of oil onto your paper towel and wipe the surface. And you'll see that the clay stuck to the raised areas will come off on your paper towel. And the stuff in the backfilled area will hopefully stay in there. I got a little bit too much clay there, so you can just use your nail or a blade or something to scrape a little bit out. Go ahead and use as many paper towels as you need because, once it gets saturated like that, it's not going to do you any good. So, that's the basic principle of both grouting a mosaic and backfilling. You're really just filling in the gaps with a contrasting clay. All right. So I can spend a little more time doing that, but I won't waste our time. But you get the idea that you want to remove the clay from the top surface and leave it in those gaps. And then at the end, that's what it'll look like after you've done a nice, careful job. You don't want to get that oil off that I just put on. Okay, I'm going to take a second and get all this goo off my hands. I must admit that the gooey grout is probably one of my favorite parts of doing polymer clay. I don't know why.